I don't write actually that many songs. I will write maybe a song a month or every 2 months. But it will be just sort of whatever is going on that month or two. What I also learned, some these good stuff that happens when you get older and wiser, right? is that only maybe 10 or 20% of it is like intentional. And such a big chunk of it is just who you happen to be hanging out with that month, or what was happening in politics or weather. Kind of like when you see a snapshot of yourself with your friends 10 years before, and you go, oh my God, that fringe, or just a certain circumstance that it's out of your control that you are just not aware of. But it's only like 10 or 20% was intentional. It's actually so few things that are intentional.
If travel is
I wanted to talk about the sounds that are in the album, because the two sounds that are the strongest are obviously violins and beats. And I think it's very interesting that you chose those sounds, because a lot of violins, they go straight to your emotions, they go straight to your heart. But a beat is also a heartbeat, but it means a kind of marching forward. And you can hear it in Black Lake a lot, that idea of the emotions, but also the moving forward.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy you say that. I felt such a relief and so grateful that majority of the reviews have been about that there is a healing process there. It's not just moaning.
Is that what you were worried about? We should shut up now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting for me. I've never really gone through something like this before. And what I think a year after I looked into the writing and I looked at the songs I got, I thought it was quite interesting. And my friend gave me this self-help book that it sold in like skrillion copies. And like Oprah Winfrey loved it or something. And I was like, oh my God, am I that normcore,
What was the book? I
can't remember the name of it. But actually the fact that it was so like generic, that was actually quite helpful. So that's not you, that's just what everybody would feel. And then you can start separating about what's your own mess that you need to like just tidy up and roll up your sleeves and do a cleaning. Or which are the things that happen to all people anyway, and it's just a question of time and just to wait it out. To understand that there's this process of grief. I mean, it can be not that serious to like really, really serious. For example, they compare it to like losing your job or losing a close relative, like dying, or like losing a partner. It's obviously very different in how serious it is, but it's always the same emotional chronology and same stages you go through, like a pattern. And when I went through it, it literally felt like there were chapters in a book. A juxtaposition.
There's like anger, grief, all those things, isn't there, that you go through?
Yeah, and certain questions you ask, and then it's like this going through the memories, mutual memories, and it's just like a certain process. And that's kind of when I thought, oh my God, this is like way too self-indulgent to release. But maybe if I just make it as universal as I can, it will actually stop being self-indulgent and just become universal. But to be honest, I was so much deep in it that I actually have no idea if I succeeded. I did my best. Probably in like 10 years I will look back on it and go, oh, oops, I should have not put that sentence in there or whatever. Oh, love was
the reason why Black Lake is the centre is there's a point a little bit where you're in a rowing boat, and you know that if you keep rowing, eventually you'll get to the shore, but you can't really see the shore. You're just rowing and hoping that you're going to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another complicated factor which you kind of address in the lyrics, which is if you have a child in the middle of that's really
it just puts everything difficult. It's another level.
If you're coping with that, there's something that's very prosaic about that, meaning that you have to make sure your child is fine. Is your child happy? Is your child fed? Is your child going to school? Is your child coming back from school? But there's also all the emotions that you're dealing with as well. Yeah,
it's definitely a very curious task and very humbling to have to do that when you're at your most emotional and then have to go all Buddhist about it at 3:30. But I think that's also part of the grief, thing. And that infamous book I told you about talks about that when something like that happens, that's one of the reasons why it is as serious as it is. It's not just you. Then you would have just gone on the Himalaya on that motorcycle trip you always wanted to go to and drunk vodka for 2 months or whatever. But that's not an option, And also when it's something in the family, like I'm not even going to compare it to in families, when somebody dies, It was interesting to read about that for me, because the whole thing is not just about you. It's about the parents, about your siblings, it's about everybody knows everyone, and it's not just how you are connected to that person, it's about the interconnectivities between the whole family and all the friends and redefining those relationships and before and after, and it's a curious task,
Yeah, redefining your future. It's always difficult.
yeah, tell me about it.
Maybe he will come out of this loving me.
When you're making songs, then, do you have a kind of visual in your head as well?
It varies. I mean, most often it's like a color associated with a song. Sometimes it's just little bits, like there'll be something in the lyric that sort of happens to be quite visual, like throwing a cutlery off a cliff or something. And sometimes it is, like you're writing about a friend you love a lot, or then sort of everything associated with that person becomes the visual cues,
Yeah.
So it's different, but then there's definitely songs of mine that don't have any visual clues.
Although she's always in charge of her creations, Björk loves to collaborate. On this album, she worked with dark soundscaper The Hacks and Cloak and Venezuelan hip-hop producer Arca. Here's Arca.
What's interesting about the collaboration was how, if she was going to explain something to me, it might be with a movement or talking about sound in non-musical terms a lot, Because by doing that, it's not like a literal problem solving, but it becomes kind of more like I have to interpret and she has to interpret. And by doing that, the solutions come from places closer to the heart, I guess.
What I've kind of learned definitely with my collaborations, it's not so much about the collaborators, how fantastic they are. It's all about the two people meeting at the right time in the right space, and that, that magic happens when you got so much to offer to each other, that it's somehow equal.
We just, in a very kind of playful way, started sending music to each other, back and forth. I remember I sent her really early on one of my favorite classical music compositions by an Indian composer, actually, called V.S. Narasimhan, and my favorite video of a kora player, YouTube links, really. And she sent me back, her favorite kind of clips. Eventually, it became like a conversation where we weren't really sending any words. When she played me the songs, the first thing that struck me was that they were really, really close to finished. I mean, in terms of structure and stuff like that. They were demos and the strings were, works in progress, synthesized versions of what the strings were later going to become. But I remember exactly how I was even sitting when I listened to them, and how, when she played Family and Black Lake, I just started crying. It was just my first exposure to the songs was of this like immense emotional impact.
A place and the child.
We talk about how things move, and if, for example, the strings at the beginning of Family were tracked in such a way where they're detuning, like you could hear the oscillation, and then we would do a take where that was happening a little bit, and then the next take we would tell the players to just exaggerate it so much, to push it to an extreme. I really enjoy that about Björk, is that she feels very comfortable, or feels naturally attracted to the extremes, and putting extremes up against each other. I was related to that in her music, or if one part is doing something, the other part might be doing something so far from it that it actually works.
But I mean, I do think we all go kind of through different stages in our lives. We kind of have that stage when we're like very downtown partying a lot or whatever, and then we have that stage where we go a lot to the beach or whatever. And I think we're all trying to balance these two things, like the urban and the rural. And probably most of us are never gonna like commit to one or the other. We're gonna have years where we're gonna say, okay, that's it, I'm never gonna be rural again. And you go, oh, that's it, I've had enough of urban, up to my ears of urban. And I think we're always trying to balance the two, and we're always trying to balance the personal and the kind of more social, and it's a balancing act, and we're just giving it our best shot, really.
Most of it we would do like in houses, you know, like studios can be quite oppressive. So we would just like set up a computer and some nice speakers in a place that had windows. In Iceland and New York and in London a little bit. The environments were always changing. Actually, one of my favorite places that we worked in was actually a lighthouse called Grota in Iceland. And if we weren't out of the lighthouse by the time the tide came up, then we would be trapped or whatever. You know, like there were all these amazing locations. I think that's something very beautiful about how she works. She chooses to change the environment as much as possible. I really like it, you know. I was used to always working in just one bedroom for like 3 years without changing, but I think you really gain a lot by changing the spaces that you write in or the spaces that you shape sounds in, because the spaces shape the song, and if something kind of transforms along with the spaces, you might be able to reach a kind of truth. And I say that word hesitantly, but you might peel away the layers, and if something sounds beautiful in all kinds of different spaces, then you might be getting to the essence of something. I really love History of Touches. I think History of Touches, to me, was one of the ones that happened really quickly. And in that sense, I don't remember exactly how we put it together, how those kind of sounds came about. And so I feel like I can still learn from it when I hear it.
You have 2 children, one is a boy and one is a girl, and so do I, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is a difference in the way that you need to bring a child of a different sex into the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, when I brought up my boy, I was really like so young. We were almost like siblings or something, and just always together. So for me, I was just like this sexes being different. That's just over. We're all the same, and we were just like hanging out for years, really. And then I had a girl much later. You know, when I'm more sort of a little bit not as blue-eyed, maybe. So it's interesting that I had the girl much later. I wonder if it would have been the other way around. But I mean, I think there's definitely, looking at how I brought my girl, there were definitely some things with how I brought my boy that I let him off easy on a couple of things. I definitely did that. But
what kind of things?
Where I was just copying maybe my culture or how things were done in my family. You know, just like domestic tasks and, you know, like really banal stuff like that. But I mean, I think it's also, we also mustn't forget that it's a lot about the difference in characters, you know. I mean, I was really noticing that so much, how different they are in characters. They're so different too. But I'm really happy, actually, that I got to bring up a girl later, you know, and I could be more just aware and more tell her about things that traps and certain things you have to be careful about. I think sometimes we ladies, we are too adaptable to other people's situations. We have to remember that, to stand our ground and let people come into our situations, not just visit other people's.
As well as her new album, Björk has a major exhibition which has just opened in New York at the Museum of Modern Art. It chronicles her career and includes sound, instruments, costumes and music videos, and robots. And what about your MoMA retrospective? So this is very fantastic, very big, and there's a lot going on in it. You've got all the albums to go through in one room, and then there's a kind of sensory experience around Black Lake. Do you want to talk us through how you think it's going to be?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, Klaus Biesenbach asked me for a few years before I said yes. For me, like, being that occupied with my past, it's not majorly attractive. It might sound ungrateful, but I think a lot of musicians, it's kind of important. It's like, where's your next song? Is kind of like more important sometimes, or most of the time actually. But then he kind of repeatedly asked me, and then in the end he probably hooked me in by commissioning a new piece, which is basically called, in my language, writing a new song. MoMA commissioned a new piece, and we went last summer to Iceland and filmed, Black Lake, 10-minute long song. So that was a really, big honor to have MoMA commission that. So we're going to show that, obviously. Old pop and roller like me, where you're kind of used to touring, where you have to set up a new PA in every place. It's like a luxury to just set up speakers and they're there for 3 months. And we sort of got the best possible speakers and the best possible projectors. So that's quite lush. And the Accent Cloak actually is helping us with some infrasound, additional sub-massage in Black Lake room. And then in so one room, just all the videos. I think all the video directors I worked with in the past are quite thrilled to show their work, not just on dodgy YouTube links, They can actually see it in Technicolor and with good sound. There's the Biophilia instruments, they're on the ground floor, so people can see them and have access to them. And the apps, the more sort of philanthropic, educational angle. You can be on the first floor without paying.
Given that it's a retrospective moment, you do have to go back, you have to look back at the stuff that you've done before. How has that made you feel?
I mean, I was kind of really shying away from it a lot. But I have to admit, it has been quite helpful, especially coming at this time in my life where it's really like major crossroads. And it's been kind of hard sometimes to really do it. I've tried to be more hands-off with it because I felt it was too narcissistic if I was controlling my own retrospective.
That's quite normal, it's your retrospective.
Right? I don't know.
Shouldn't you want to do it?
Well, what I was doing more was letting people like Klaus and other people lead. And then I would be more when they were putting things not in the right balance, I would be more like the one correcting it, be like, well, actually, that photographer, I only worked with him once. He wasn't my major influence or whatever, adjusting things.
Yeah.
So that's more, I feel, what I've been doing, when it doesn't feel right.
And has there been bits where you thought, oh no, that actually worked really brilliantly, I am really proud of that?
I don't know, I think what stands up for some reason most is having to go through all the photographs or something with Klaus for the book and pulling old footage of videos, and they're trying to be all professional, and I'm more tearful on memory lane, because this is just oh, I remember we had curry that night, and I'm just like that. It's just memories for me. So it's really mushy. I just get really mushy about my collaborators because we just had such a laugh. And there were some crazy shoots we did, and that took screaming hours, and nobody slept, and a lot of it was tough, but it's been just a lot of good memories, really.
I remember you, didn't you know?
As part of the exhibition, Björk has devised an audio guide with a difference. It's interactive, location-based, and is held together by a story. This was written by her friend, the Icelandic author Sjón, and is about a character who seems to be Björk, who takes us on a journey through her albums. It came about as a reaction to what the director of MoMA, Klaus Biesenbach, actually wanted.
Klaus was really pushing for context where we could show all the costumes. And I was like, oh no, a memorabilia, thing. It's
like
sweating.
You're like Princess Di.
Cold sweat. So I said, okay, how about there happens to be the story that me and Sjón have been writing tongue-in-cheek anyway. And the sort of average is one song per album, where me and my old friend Sjón, who's an author, Scandinavian Book Prize winners as well, so I brag about my friend. Songs like Isobel and songs like Bachelorette are songs where we kind of took that character who keeps traveling the world and writing new albums, like making a mythological creature out of her, like almost like a fable, sort of tongue-in-cheek, because it's almost like ridiculous. Like, why would you do all that stuff? Why don't you stick in Reykjavik and go to the local cafe and have a swim and chill, you know? So we kind of decided that we would use those, like Isabel and Bachelorette and other songs, Human Behaviors, maybe the first one, and spread out a fable over all the albums. I said, there's no way we're ever gonna like do it totally biographical, because it's not true, you know, and it's part of it is fantasy, you know. Anyway, so he wrote a whole story about this character going through all the albums.
When the girl was happy, the heart beat faster. When she was sad, the human behavior.
If you ever get close to us.
Then what we decided to do is to get like a really high-tech audio system with headphones and all these sensors and GPS readers and very cutting-edge things that haven't been done before. So you basically walk like in a labyrinth through the spaces, and each room is each character, and it's each album.
Inside the girl, inside the woman's toes, like warm breath hitting a cool window pane.
One thing that maybe I haven't talked about that much is that for me, the characters on the covers of my album are almost like tarot cards. They're kind of like the archetypes or the sort of character that did that album. I think often once I've done a whole album and I've mixed it and I put it and given it to my manager and it's done, I sort of start doing the visuals and I can sort of be like, oh my god, okay, I get it. It is this kind of character.
It's funny because tarot cards always have little names underneath it, and they're like the priest or the hangman or something like that, and you've got your titles, you know, anyway. You could be the Vespertine, or you could be...
Yeah, I mean, this was my way of trying to tap into something that's in everyone, you know, that it's not me. And Biophilia, for example, was the airhead music teacher, you know. That's why we had to have this kind of huge orange wig, because she's got her head a little bit in the clouds. And she talks about space, and she's a bit hippie, actually. And this one, it was like, I mean, obviously with a wound in her chest, like really melodramatic, self-pity kind of
but also
goth chick.
Yes, so you've got rubber on. So you're holding yourself together with your rubber as well. Yeah,
it's definitely like... And the rubber was also a bit reference to the Black Lake kind of stage. Yeah. So for me, it's always a little bit about that, this character. And we base these rooms a little bit on these characters.
It's interesting as well because obviously your music combines all sorts of things. Your life combines a lot of things, very elemental nature, technology, human emotions, but then city. You know, there's a lot of different kind of universals in there. And it's interesting that you've chosen to make yourself a little character going through, because actually that's quite often how people get into your music. They project onto you whatever they feel, or you tell them how you feel, and that's how they get in. There's always a human element, even in something like Biophilia, which is about the elements. There's always a human person, which is you in there.
Oh, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. There's definitely been moments where I was maybe too sure of myself, and then I can smell stagnation, you know? It's a very specific smell.
What does it smell of? I'd like to smell that. The rot. Do you think it gets easier or harder as you get older?
I think it has ups and downs. I think it's also natural to kind of like get obsessed with something for 2 or 3 years and then you're over it. For example, when I did Vespertine, you know, the laptops just came out. I'd just done this kind of really horrendous movie and I was just like, okay, I'm just going to drink cups of cocoa and sit on my floor with woolly socks and a blanket and write Skrillian microbeats and have the most Pacific album on earth and just noodle and noodle and noodle and noodle and noodle and noodle and never go out ever, you know. And I think we all get those moods, you know, like we just do it and then when we're in the middle of it we think we're never gonna wanna go out again or something, and then we do it and we get it out of our systems and spring comes and we're back, you know, on that table headbanging again or something.
You cast aside the socks.
Yeah. And you put on the heels.
Obviously, you're now bringing your work to the stage, you're going to perform it. How do you go about performing something that's essentially, you were very nervous about bringing out, weren't you? Because you thought it might be embarrassing or it's very personal, and you have to make it into something spectacular, watchable.
Yeah, I decided just to go for the music angle on it. That the musicologist in me, which is a little nerd sitting on my shoulder, like whispering in my ear all the time. And I don't look at it as like biophilia, which was more like Star Wars or something. I'm like nicknaming it now. Like I couldn't say it at the time, but looking back on it now, it probably was my little Star Wars project, pet Star Wars project, like sci-fi. So quite theatrical. But this one is the opposite for me. It's all about the music. So it's not that theatrical. It's not so much props or anything. I think you just have to kind of sing the songs.
We are each other's dance.
You've achieved a lot in your life. You're not even 50 yet, and you've got a retrospective at the moment. You've made loads of albums.
I think the workaholic aspect has not... I was aware of that. That it was maybe not the biggest surprise. I should chill more, actually. I'm going to chill more.
Really? Are you now? Now you've done a retrospective, that's it, you're never going to do anything else.
No, I think maybe the biggest surprise, I think that we probably all a bit like that I thought, oh my God, I should have done that much better, and what was I thinking? And then you read your diaries or something, and then you're actually just doing your best. Okay, it maybe wasn't as perfect as you would have liked it to be, but you just give it your best shot, and that's it, and just give yourself a break, And
that must make you feel very optimistic for the future as well. And your future might have changed, but it's still there.
Yeah, but as we all know, the future it has to be a little scary too, right? Or it doesn't work. That's also a sort of an interesting thing that we learn over and over again, that is that when we're too confident or too sure about something, it's not right. So it has to be that 50-50 feeling that you have no idea what you're doing, but it just feels right in your gut, and you love doing it.
I live by the ocean.